When the Falcons announced they were finally holding an introductory press conference for Matt Ryan in his new role, I think a lot of people assumed this was going to be more of a ceremonial thing than a substantive. Welcome back, a victory lap, a chance for the organization to celebrate a franchise legend and generate some positive PR. And on the surface level, yeah, there was some of that, but once you really listen to what was said, how it was said, and more importantly, who said what and who didn't, it becomes pretty clear very quick that the press conference wasn't just about nostalgia at all. It was about structure, power, and it was about the Falcons quietly telling you how football decisions are going to be made moving forward. Because the most important thing to understand right away is that Matt Ryan wasn't introduced as an advisor. He wasn't introduced as a figurehead. Wasn't introduced as someone who's going to pop in every now and then, shake hands, and laugh and joke with you. He was introduced as the president of football. Okay, not president of football operations, but president of football. And that title matters, okay, because Arthur Blank went out of his way to define what that role means. And when he said everything between football and grass, that wasn't just a catchy phrase. That was ownership drawing a clear box around for what Matt is responsible for, and most importantly, what he's not responsible for. And that's where I think a lot of fans are going to, misunderstand this if they're not careful, because this is not Matt Ryan coming in to be a shadow general manager. He's not going to be, the puppet master, and, the GM and head coach are just going to be extensions of him. This is not Matt Ryan calling plays through a headset. This is not Matt Ryan overriding coaches or inserting himself into a weekly game plan. Both Arthur and Matt himself will be very deliberate in shutting that idea down before it could even take off, all right? And Matt even said it plainly in the press conference, okay? He's not calling plays. He's not running the scouting meetings. He's not trying to do anyone else's job. His job is to hire the right people and then support them. And let's pause there, because that sounds simple, but in the NFL, that's actually one of the hardest things to get right. Hiring is the hardest part of building a franchise. Not the play design, not the draft boards, not cap management. It's hiring. And the Falcons openly admitted through this move that they want a football mind, not a business mind leading that process, okay? They want someone who understands what functional football environments look like, because he's lived inside of one for over a decade. Hell, he was the reason why the football was functional, okay? I could argue that. One of the clearest themes throughout the entire press conference was really just alignment. You could tell this organization is tired of disconnect, tired of the silos, tired of pulling in different directions. And Matt Ryan used a phrase that stood out to me when he talked about the head coach and general manager not seeing the game polar opposite. That's a very quarterback way of framing it, and it tells you exactly how he's thinking. He's not saying they have to agree on everything. He's not saying, they can't be tension or debate, but what he's saying is there has to be, at a fundamental level, these two people cannot be operating from completely different football philosophies. And that's really important, because when you start doing that, your team is just going to be kind of stuck in that limbo, okay? You can kind of see with the last few years where, are we good enough to compete, or do we need to just rebuild? And people have been debating that for like the past few years, okay? And getting that aligned perfectly is going to be doing wonders for not just the team, but the players too, because it's just like they're kind of stuck in limbo at the moment. That idea of alignment flows directly into how Matt talked about the coaching search, and this is where I think people really need to slow down and listen, because when Matt was asked what he's looking for in a head coach, he didn't default to the offense versus defense. He didn't say we need an offensive play caller to keep up with the league. He didn't chase trends. He didn't say the magic words people expect to hear in January. What he said very clearly was that the Falcons need the right person to maximize this team. That matters more than almost anything else said in this press conference, because the NFL right now is obsessed with the trends, all right? Everybody wants the next offensive mind. Everybody's looking for a Sean McVay, a Kyle Shanahan. They're looking for those guys. Everybody wants the next schematic savant, and everybody wants to copy what has worked for some other people. And Matt Ryan, whether intentionally or not, he pushed back on that entire way of thinking. He said, he made it clear that that side of the ball doesn't matter. Offense doesn't matter if you call offense, defense, doesn't matter if you're a special teams coordinator, right? That thing that really mattered to him the most was just the fit and how they fit within the organization. And that's something I've been saying for nearly a month now, ever since like week 17, week 18. If we're going to get a new coach, doesn't matter if he calls plays or not. And everybody's getting that misconstrued. We don't need necessarily just this offensive mind. We don't need the next Sean McVay. We just need somebody that can be a good leader of men. I've been saying on this channel, I've been saying on social media, I've been saying in these conversations with my friends, we don't need to chase, offense or defense. Just chase the fit. They need a head coach who understands how to maximize the roster and knows how to manage the locker room. And that's the moment in the franchise's timeline. Just get somebody that can be a stable presence. Whether he does call plays or not, it just doesn't matter to me. Just get the right guy in. And hearing Matt Ryan echo that philosophy tells you he's not caught up in the popular. He's caught up in what works. And selfishly, yes, it was validating for me to hear that, because it tells me we're seeing this the same way, not emotionally, not nostalgically, but structurally. This team doesn't need another reset. It doesn't need another philosophical swerve. It just needs someone who can walk in, stabilize the building, and elevate what's already here. And granted, this roster's floor is pretty damn high. Just look at the side of the ball on offense. Look at the other side. Okay, we have pieces in place to not just make a wild card appearance. Recently, that's what a lot of people have just been complacent with, especially with, John Harbaugh and Matt LaFleur being available. They was like, okay, these guys are available. Let's go get them because we'll immediately win the division and be in the playoffs. And I understand we haven't won in a long time, bro, but that is not necessarily just the right way to go about it. Just because you've been starved with food doesn't mean you should just eat anything, right? I do agree, like, those coaches, they will bring us to, the top of the division. But my thing is, we've talked about how bad this division has been for so long, and now all of a sudden y'all want to just win the division. That just doesn't sit right with me. I would say let's get the coach that can not just have us competing, but actually having a chance to win those games. There's a difference between being the Steelers and the Texans, okay? They just played last night, but you get what I'm saying. Everybody is going to be like, okay, the Steelers are going to be in for the playoffs, but they're not going to really do anything, all right? Look at the Texans. The Texans came to the season, okay, they got to the divisional last year. They could be a threat to possibly get to the conference game, and they're in the divisional. They're one game away, all right? People talk about you differently if you have a chance to actually win the game. And this is also where Matt's quarterback background shows up in a major way, because quarterbacks don't care whether the coach is offensive or defensive. They care whether the coach is clear. They care whether the coach is consistent and whether or not the standard is done, set the right way and abided by, regardless of the circumstances. And Matt framed his evaluation of coaches through this exact lens: emotional stability, presence, the ability to handle the highs and lows, and a quarterback thinking the plots of the head coach and stuff. That's rare. He even talked about learning something from every coach he's been around and pulling pieces from each one. And that tells you he's not looking for a carbon copy of anyone. He's building a profile, and that profile isn't based on buzzwords or trends. It's based on lived experience of a guy that played in the league, and it's based on knowing what works inside of a locker room and what quietly erodes that trust over time. And that brings us back to the alignment, because Matt isn't just looking for the right head coach in isolation. He's looking for the right head coach in tandem with the general manager, someone who can work collaboratively, change ideas when necessary, not even just change, but challenge them as well, and still move in the same direction. That's why he emphasized they don't have to be best friends, okay? They just have to see the game similarly. They have to respect each other above all, and that's how you avoid those power struggles, because you avoid those mixed messages when they're aligned like that. That's how you avoid, tearing the building in half, so to say. And then another major takeaway from this press conference is the role that Matt Ryan is going to play as a buffer between not just the football operations, but ownership. All right, because Arthur Blank made it very clear without saying it outright. Yes, this is still Arthur's team. Yes, final authority ultimately rests at the ownership, but Matt Ryan is now the filter. He's the translator. He's, the person who understands football realities. He's kind of like a mediator, and that's really massive, because one of the biggest fears fans have when owner-led franchises is interference, knee-jerk reactions, and overcorrect. What this structure does, it reduces that risk, because Matt Ryan knows what it feels like to be inside of a locker room during adversity. He knows what it feels like to be, when it's outside noise and it's getting loud. He knows what it feels like when the patience is being tested, and that perspective matters when big decisions are being discussed. And another subtle but important point was the order of operations. The Falcons clearly prioritized the head coaching search first, with the general manager set to follow. Okay, this wasn't accidental. This tells you that they want leadership and culture defined before the personnel philosophy is locked in. They want a head coach who helps shape the identity of the team, not one who's found or who's handed a vision that they don't believe in. And quick pause on this. This makes me think about what Raheem Morris was talking about before the season starts, when he was asked multiple times, what do you want this team's identity to be? And he just kind of dodged the question, saying, we're going to let the play do the talking. We're going to let the guys get on the grass and they determine it. That just doesn't sit right. That never sat right with me in the moment, and it still doesn't right now, because how are you the head coach and you don't even want to answer to the media what the team's identity is. You should be the main one saying this is our identity, this is what we're going to do. Okay, and you look on the polar opposite end of the spectrum, you look at Dan Campbell. He came in his first introductory press conference. He told you what kind of team it was going to be, and you see it every week since he got hired, every game, that, you know, they're building the team just like how he envisioned it, and they play how he said they were going to play. See, they're a pretty successful team at the moment. And Matt also talked about his experience as a quarterback, you know, sitting in meetings with head coaches and general managers, being asked for opinions, being part of those conversations, being, you know, the final decision maker. And that context matters because he understands influence without authority. He understands how to contribute without overstepping his boundaries. And that's exactly the type of temperament that you want in this role. There's also a strong emphasis on relationships, both inside and outside the building, because Matt mentioned leaning on people around the league who've made similar transitions. That tells you he's not approaching this with the ego. He's approaching it with, you know, like he approached the football his entire career: prepare, learn, and adapt. Okay. He even talked about in the press conference about how, you know, he went into the meetings not really understanding what was going on, but then Greg Beatles gave him, you know, a format to go by, and he was able to adjust off of that. And that shows you he's willing to learn, he's willing to grow into his role. Okay. And one of the quieter but more meaningful moments in this press conference was Matt's discussion of former players and bringing them back into the building. That's just not a sentiment, that's culture. Players respect players, especially players who've done it at a high level in that same uniform. Rebuilding credibility inside the locker room that isn't just about winning games, but once again, it's about the identity. And Matt Ryan represents a standard that doesn't need to be explained. What stood out to me the most, you know, is how consistent the messaging was between Arthur Blank, Greg Beatles, and Matt Ryan. There was no contradictions. That alone tells you that the structure has been thought through more carefully than, you know, past iterations. And Matt Ryan isn't here to relive the past. He's here to shape the future. And the Falcons really aren't asking him to be everything. They're asking him to, you know, be exactly what this organization has lacked for a long time: a football-centric leader. Let the football people make the football decisions, as a lot of people will say. You know, a leader who understands the human side of the game and the strategic side of the game and the emotional weight of running an NFL franchise. Okay. Now, this move doesn't guarantee success. No move ever does, but it gives the Falcons a chance to build something coherent, something intentional, and something stable. And after years of inconsistency, that alone is a meaningful step forward, because championships aren't built on slogans, they're built in structure. But, you know, that's it for me, y'all. I just kind of came on to recap what went on in that press conference, because I know a lot of y'all couldn't catch it, but just gave y'all a quick, you know, overview of what happened there. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe for more. I'll catch y'all next video. Goodbye.